I'm Julie Herman of Jaybird Quilts, and welcome back to the Alphabet Soup Sew Along. Today I'm going to talk about fabric selection. Alphabet Soup is the third Fussy Cut Sew Along. The pieces in Alphabet Soup are ideal for using the Jaybird Quilts Fussy Cut shapes. When looking for fabrics, there are three key things that we want to keep in mind. The first is the contrast between the fabrics and the letter background. So for instance, what that means is kind of hard to read this T if it was purple and blended in with the background. Same thing with this O. So you want contrast between your letter and the background. Sometimes it's a little more middle of the road contrast like these examples. And then sometimes it's even higher contrast like in the example of this letter T. That purple really contrasts off of the navy background. So that's the first thing to consider. The second thing to consider is a limited contrast in the two fabrics that you select for the letter. You want some contrast so you can see some interest and focus on the things that you've taken the time to do your fussy cutting, but you don't want too much of a contrast. You can see here I have very low contrast in this letter T. There's some contrast here. This one definitely reads more as green, and this reads more as yellow, but there's enough contrast that you can see that this is clearly the letter T. And then with this example, you can see that the letter O is clearly the letter O, even though this one is more green and this one has more of a blue background. Another example of low contrast is this letter P. You can see I chose a pink that has a pink in it and then an orange that has a pink, but they work together very well and they highly contrast off of the navy background. The third thing to consider is scale. Your prints should be a scale that will look good in the size of the shapes. For instance, this floral, the fairy dust, and some of the other prints from Tula Pink's upcoming Nightshade collection would work well, but the cameo print of the faces would not work as well. So if I open this up, you can see the cameo is just as large as an entire letter. So if we were going to fussy cut this, we're going to get just a nose, just an eye, just a piece of hair, not enough to get a feel for what's going on. So this is too large in scale. You can kind of get the whole face, but you lose a lot of the effect. Also, it changes the color of the fabric. If you fussy cut this here, you're getting more of a white print. Here, you're getting something dark. Over here, you're getting pink. This is a good opportunity, though, if you are using this for something else and you have already fussy cut the faces and you have all of this background left. This background would make for a good place for fussy cutting because you could get the flowers, the little skull and crossbones. So keep that in mind. Nothing is ever really wasted. So if you have already fussy cut these, for instance, you can still use a lot of the background. All 6 of the Jaybird Quilts fussy cut shapes are used in the combination of letters. I made this example of the word to simply because these 2 letters together showcase every one of the shapes. So the hexagon is used here in the center of the letter O. So I fussy cut this little guy holding on to the apple. The half hexagon is used a number of times around the letter O and in different orientations as it rotates around the block. The diamond is used over here in the letter T. The large half triangle, the 4.5 inch, is used to create a rectangle around the letter O, and it's also used in the setting of the T. So sometimes you can see I chose to fussy cut an animal, and then sometimes I chose to do some more background since this purple is my background. I figured it would kind of be fun to have some of the creatures popping up here and there, but not as much as in the feature of the letter themselves. The triangle is used down here. And then the small half triangle, the 2.5 inch, is used up here, as well as in a few other places in the block. So you really get to use these a lot with Alphabet Soup. I'm now going to go over some fabric selection examples and why I think they would work well with Alphabet Soup. So one of the projects that we're planning on doing is the baby quilt from the book. You can choose any 5 words. For the sew along, I'm featuring cut, pin, sew, make quilt. Thought it was kind of a funny pun to create a quilt that talked about how you make a quilt. I've made the quilt before, and I'm going to be making it again. And the Cut Pin Sew Make quilt has 5 words, so you need 5 sets or 5 pairs of fabric. So this is one of the examples I came up with. With this collection, I decided to pick one feature print along with one fabric from True Colors or some of the basics, so that you have the character to be fussy cut and then another color that will support the letter for readability. So we have the deer with the dot, then we have the squirrel with the dot in green, then we have the squirrel with the stripe in blue, then we have the raccoon with the dot in purple, and then the fox with the diamonds. The scale of all of these prints work because they're small enough to be featured inside the shapes. So for instance, we might not be able to get the deer all of the antlers, but you can get the deer head that way, you can get it that way. And keep in mind, when you're working with different shapes, you might not be able to get the entire deer head in a triangle, but maybe that's an opportunity to use the antlers or to go with a flower or a combination of things. You're always going to be able to get more in a hexagon than you are in a half triangle. But that doesn't mean that the print itself doesn't work. But I would go ahead and take your fussy cut shapes and audition them on top of your fabric to get a feel for what things would look like. It's also a good idea to take your cell phone, take a quick little picture of them so that you remember, oh, that's really the way I wanted it, was with the straight side here and with the angled side here, and that's how I thought it looked good. It's very easy when working with so many fabrics to lose track of what your original plan might have been. So all of these fabrics work very well in scale. It doesn't mean you can't use larger dots and larger stripes. It just is going to be different, and you're going to lose them a little more in these shapes. So with the letters, I think for readability purposes, these work really well. Another fabric pull that I did that would work really well for the baby quilt project is right here. And this is, again, Tulip Pinks. There's True Colors in here. And then there's a mix of prints that were from a few different collections that are still available and are now the pint-sized prints. So this flower is from Curiouser and Curiouser. This hedgehog is from Tiny Beasts. This diamond is from Daydreamer. This is also from Daydreamer and Daydreamer. And these little fruits as well. And you can see the scale works really well with the shapes. Kind of fun. I haven't done this yet to fussy cut a diamond in a diamond. That's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to doing that. And the rainbows. And one thing to keep in mind here is one of the 3 things we talked about is limited contrast within the fabrics for readability. So if you're working with a fabric such as this one, I really wanted to use this ombre. You need to keep in mind where along the fabric it's going to work with whichever other fabric you picked. So for instance, if I start cutting pieces from down here, that contrast is too high and is not going to work very well with that purple background. It's going to work here with the yellow as well as with the green, and then there's going to come a point where it gets too much. It's probably right around here. Personal preference, definitely not here, probably not here, probably about here is good. So keep that in mind. You might need a little bit more fabric in that case. Depends on the length of your word, what you're planning on doing with your baby quilt. All of the things we're talking about work for any of the projects, not just the baby quilt. That's just what I pulled these fabrics for. So in addition to the Cut Pin Sew quilt that I've already finished, I actually have another one that's in progress. Started this a few years ago and then got busy with other projects and haven't had a chance to come back and finish it. And this sew along is a great opportunity for me to finish this quilt. So the first 2 words, I have 2 purples and then 2 kind of pinks. And then the rest of the fabrics that I've picked are 2 greens, 2 greenish blues, and 2 whites. And again, you'll see that the scale here is going to work really well with our pieces. I'm going to be able to fussy cut the hands, the thread spools, the scissors. Now this print doesn't have anything to be fussy cut, and that's okay. So we can just follow the directions to rotary cut those from strips. But it's the perfect companion to this one. And all 6 of these contrast really well off of the navy, which is the background that I've chosen. One of the other projects we're going to be working on is the Name Quilt. I absolutely adore the Name Quilt. I have made it for my son Nate. who has now requested a new one since he corrects me and tells me his proper name is Nathan. I've made it for myself, and I actually used mine on the back of another quilt, so it's a double-sided quilt. And I've made them as baby gifts a couple of times. I haven't made one yet for my son William, so it's his turn. These are the fabrics I have selected for William. This is the Don't Slip from Tula Pink's Monkey Wrench. Been holding on to this for a long time. And this is another print from that collection with little frogs. So with the Name Quilt, I suggest using a wide back for the base of the quilt. It's a really good opportunity to have such large designs. Those would not work as well with fussy cutting. And then there's going to be a horizontal strip that has the name in it. This is going to be my main fabric for that strip. So I went through my stash and started pulling out some options, and I thought that I would pull some pinkish red that pulls off of the ends of the little banana peels. And I came up with this, which is the same print, this frog, and this other print. But then I realized I don't actually have enough. So you need to make sure you have enough. Even if I wasn't fussy cutting, I'd be really cutting it close, but I definitely would want to fussy cut these. So since I didn't have enough, I started looking at other options that were similar. And I found these two fabrics from Tula Pink's Saltwater. And this is actually perfect tie-in because all of William's quilts so far use a variety of different Tula Pink's aquatic fabrics: Saltwater, Zuma, Neptune, Prince Charming. So this is going to be a perfect tie-in with his existing quilts. So I've got this little seahorse, and then these hexagons that are in a diamond pattern. So I am really looking forward to cutting the letters out of his name in these two. And I think the scale's right, and they're both going to contrast well off of here, and there's low enough contrast between the two of them together. So whether you're working on a quilt, a pillow, or another project from Alphabet Soup, I hope you found the information today helpful. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like it, share your comments with us, and subscribe to the channel. You can also turn on notifications for the channel to receive an alert every time that I post a new video. I'll be back here in a few days to guide you through cutting the shapes for your letters. See you soon.